Sometimes the guy at the top, by any honest measure, just isn't fit to be there. It's really not all that uncommon. Their decisions make no sense. Their plans quietly fall apart. But year after year, sometimes decade after decade, none of those bad decisions seem to have any consequences at all. Because they have a gift, and it has nothing to do with competence. They've just figured out how to hire talented people and stand behind them with a smile. This episode is about a duke who is the patron saint of hiring the right people and failing at everything else. That's Duke Ling of Wey. By every account, he was a wreck, paranoid, hot-tempered, obsessed with beautiful courtiers, running a small, weak state while its neighbors should have swallowed it whole. By rights, he should have lost everything. But he didn't. He had a prince so beautiful, the whole region was infatuated with him, and a temple priest with a tongue so sharp it could win a war without an army. Duke Ling barely had to show up for his own reign. He hired charm, he hired talent, and he let him work. And he coasted on their gifts for a lifetime. The reckoning was always a year away and never arriving. Watching all of this was Confucius. One day, someone asked him the exact question you're asking now. How has a ruler this hopeless not lost his state? Confucius didn't hesitate at all. He listed the man's staff, the silver tongue at the temple, the sharp minds at the border, and he said, with people like that, how could he lose? That's the unsettling lesson here. A pretty face and a clever tongue can carry a man past his failures, past what he deserves, for a lifetime. And according to Confucius, a world like that, where these things have so much power, has something truly broken at its center. Exploring the Analects, Episode 12, Passages 1.3 and 6.16. Hiding behind a smile. Hey folks, this is Elliot Bernstein. Thanks for joining me for Episode 12 of Exploring the Analects. In this episode, I'll be telling a couple of stories about the ways people win praise and gain influence. These stories center around 6 main figures. You'll meet the ineffectual Duke Ding, nominal head of Confucius's home state of Lu, the vain and obsessive Duke Ling, ruler of the state of Wei, along with his wife Nanzi and son Kwai Koi. And most importantly, you'll meet 2 of Duke Ling's ministers, Prince Chao and Priest Tuo. We'll cover passages 1.3 and 6.16, first reading them in Chinese and English, then discussing the historical and cultural context behind them to provide a deeper understanding of the passages. After that, we'll analyze the language found in the passages as a way to learn new words and phrases in classical Chinese and modern Mandarin. You can listen and follow the episode guide on analects.net, where you'll also find the Chinese characters for the passages and key terms in this episode. Check it out and let me know what you think. You can always reach me at elliot@analects.net. Alright then, let's get started. For passages 1.3 and 6.16, I've decided to quote the lyrics of Liar, the 1994 song by Rollins Band. Keep these words in mind throughout the episode. I think they sum up these passages pretty well. I'll hide behind a smile and understanding eyes. I'll tell you things you already know, so you can say, I really identify with you so much. And all the time that you're needing me is just the time that I'm bleeding you. Don't you get it? I'll come to you like an affliction, but I'll leave you like an addiction. You'll never forget me. You want to know why? 'Cause I'm a liar. Yeah, I'm a liar. I'll rip your mind out. I'll burn your soul. Well, I hope you enjoyed that change of pace. Now I'm going to read the passages in a modern Mandarin pronunciation, followed by translations into English. Passage 1.3 子曰巧言令色先以人 The master said, Seldom human-hearted are those whose words and manners aim to please. 6.16子曰不有祝鮀之佞而有宋朝之美难乎免于今之世矣 The master said, Without the smooth talk of Priest Tuo and the beauty of Prince Chao of Song, it sure is difficult to get by in today's world. The Analects is full of names, people and places, dynasties and titles. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because I realized just how inscrutable the book can be if you don't always know about them. There are dozens of translations out there. I've read my share of them, and the way I see it, the ones that shine introduce you to these names and do at least a little to help you understand why they're being mentioned. The ones that fall flat don't do that work. And it actually doesn't even matter if you're reading the book in Chinese or in translation. If you pick up the Analects and read a single passage, sometimes it's Confucius saying, oh no, the Ji family has 8 rows of 8 dancers. And you just think, okay, but why oh no? Sounds like a cool party. Passage 6.16 is kind of like that. You've got clever Priest Tuo, handsome Song Chao, and then there's Confucius, seeming a little jealous, maybe, that they're getting ahead in life by dressing to impress and cracking all the good jokes. But as we'll find out, he's not jealous at all. He's actually lamenting the state of the world, if not his own experience in life. You shouldn't need good looks or a way with words to get ahead in life, he thought, but those are exactly the types of people he sees being rewarded. So let's dive in a little deeper and discuss some of the ideas behind the passages, along with some philosophical, historical, and cultural context you should have in order to really grasp their meaning. We'll start off with a story about 2 dukes. Spring and autumn period China is part of the Eastern Zhou dynasty. The Zhou royal house had been around for many centuries, but after their original capital was sacked by a coalition of one of their own vassals with the Western Rong nomadic people, they were never quite the same. Those vassal states felt they couldn't count on the royal court. Some struggled with internal politics, and others became aggressive and began to occupy neighboring territories. Confucius's home state of Lu was a relatively small dukedom, but its rulers had a particularly noble lineage. They descended from the Duke of Zhou, who selflessly saved the dynasty in its early days. But by the 5th century BCE, the ruler of Lu, Duke Ding, had been mostly stripped of authority by 3 powerful families known as the Sanhuan. These families each maintained a fortified base in their respective hometowns, along with courts and retainers said to rival or exceed the splendor of Duke Ding's itself. Confucius absolutely revered the ancient Duke of Zhou, and he believed the Sanhuan were causing society to fracture by usurping authority from the hereditary ruler. By 500 BCE, just over the age of 50, he felt he was in the position to do something to change that. He had held increasingly influential political appointments and was able to convince 2 of the 3 families to tear down their stronghold walls. But while working to convince the 3rd family, armed conflict broke out between Duke Ling and this final family, and all 3 families then turned against Confucius. He was forced to flee with a core group of his disciples to the neighboring state of Wei, which by no coincidence is where these guys, Prince Chao and Priest Tuo, lived. The long story is that Confucius spends the next decade and a half traveling from state to state, trying to find a ruler righteous enough to govern according to his philosophy. His first stop on that journey was Wei. The ruler of Wei, Duke Ling, quickly gave him a position at court, and it was from that vantage point that he got a front row seat to some serious debauchery, family feuds, and political intrigue. History records Duke Ling as ill-tempered, obsessed with courtiers, and constantly paranoid about usurpers. So he surrounded himself with those he found clever and beautiful. Seeing this firsthand really solidified Confucius's view that, to paraphrase passage 1.3, people whose words and manners aim to please tend to be devious and selfish. Looming large among those clever and beautiful courtiers were Priest Tuo, the clever guy, and Prince Chao, the pretty one. Chao is definitely the better known of the 2, so I'll start with him. He came from the nearby state of Song, and although, as his name implies, he was a son of the state's ruler, he certainly wasn't Crown Prince of Song. Heading off to another state wasn't uncommon for those later in the line of succession. Staying at home could even be dangerous, if for whatever reason they got caught up in political intrigue. So like many others, he headed off to find his fortunes elsewhere, and landed in Wei. Maybe it wasn't a complete coincidence that's where he headed, because as it turned out, Duke Ling's wife, named Nanzi, was also from Song. Not just that, she was also from the ruling clan of Song. We don't know exactly how they were related to one another. Some sources say brother and sister. But considering just how juicy this story already gets, it would be easy to assume that. We're already dealing with cuckoldry and same-sex infatuation, so why not sprinkle a little incest on top? Well, I don't want to give away too much, but I told you it was going to be fun. It's no mistake that we've been using the word beautiful to describe Prince Chao. By all accounts, his looks and manners completely enchanted people, not least of whom was Duke Ling himself. The Duke heaped titles and ranks on Chao and granted him a massive salary, and the prince used his position to secure a luxurious estate and great influence. None of this was done under the radar, and that was all the more scandalous because Prince Chao and the Duke's wife, Nanzi, were an item. Everyone knew it, the court, the people of Wei. Even the commoners in Chao and Nanzi's home state of Song were talking all about it. According to the Zuo, or the Zuo commentaries on the Spring and Autumn Annals, they mocked the Duke by singing, "Since he's already satisfied your sow, why don't you return our fine boar?" But the Duke's infatuation was so deep, and so charming was Song Chao, that the Duke was childishly gleeful just to have him around, no matter what he did, and no matter who mocked him. It seems most of the court was infatuated with Song Chao, but there was at least one person who turned out to be not such a fan. Duke Ling's son Kwai Koi was the crown prince. Kwai Koi already had little love for Nanzi, since his mother was one of the Duke's concubines, and that left Nanzi somewhere between being his stepmother and just some lady who his dad married. When he heard those lyrics about the sow and the boar, became deeply embarrassed about the way Nanzi's relationship with Song Chao made his dad look. He was so scandalized by this bizarre love triangle that he plotted against Nanzi, eventually trying but failing to assassinate her. The rest of this story is for another time, but long story short, he fled to a neighboring state, his son eventually became duke, and then there was a father-son war. All right, I think we've covered manners aiming to please and the beauty of Song Chao pretty well. Let's move on to words aiming to please and the smooth talk of Priest Tuo. History doesn't credit Duke Ling with much, but one thing he did accomplish was keeping his small, geographically disadvantaged state from being swallowed up by its numerous well-resourced neighbors. It probably didn't hurt to have a Prince Charming like Song Chao on hand, and if the historical record is accurate, Priest Tuo was even more instrumental in protecting the state. Just goes to show you, even if you're a complete wreck in every other respect, if you know how to hire the right people, then you let them do their thing, things might still work out in spite of you. Priest Tuo worked in the state of Wei's ancestral temple. Ancestral temples were where tablets and artifacts would be stored in order to venerate the founders of the state, and where rituals would be conducted in an attempt to ensure continued peace and prosperity for the state. In the first generation of the Zhou dynasty, Wei was in fief to Kangshu, a younger brother of the first ruler of Zhou, King Wu. So the temple was dedicated to him, as well as his primary line of ruling descendants. Knowing that ancestry like the back of his hand is how history would best remember Priest Tuo. When the power of the Zhou kings declined in the spring and autumn period, a system of hegemons developed. In this system, the Zhou kings would confer the title of hegemon upon the most powerful state, and it was expected that this state would use their military might to maintain some semblance of order among states of the central China plain, as well as organize defense against powers from outside that region. At the time of Priest Tuo, the hegemon was the state of Jin. One day, the Duke of Jin called a summit. The topic of this summit was the threat posed by the southern kingdom of Chu. This kingdom, despite being a vassal of the Zhou some centuries earlier, had gone rogue and declared independence. And even though they were more like those ducal states than the Western Rong people who had sacked the original Zhou capital, they were still seen as aggressive outsiders with a penchant for mysticism and the occult. Duke Ling made his way to the summit with Priest Tuo in tow, and it seemed like he knew exactly who to bring, if you recall what I said about letting those you hire do their thing. During the summit, an alliance of states to defend against Chu was proposed, and in order to seal the deal, a blood pact would be sworn. The ceremony was highly ritualized, and the order in which each leader took the oath was an indication of their rank among states. That order was announced, and Duke Ling was furious to find that Wei was placed after the state of Tsai. So he ordered Tuo to defend his honor and rectify the situation. According to all accounts, well, there really is only one account, but according to that account, Tuo unleashed a torrent of weaponized history. He began with the fact that Wei was founded by the loyal full brother of the Zhou dynasty's founders, while Tsai was founded by a rebellious brother who had been exiled. He listed the ceremonial chariots, the bronze vessels, the musical instruments, and all the other gifts and honors that had been lavished upon Wei by the Zhou kings over the centuries. How could Jin rank Wei after Tsai, and still claim to hold sacred the will of the ancient sage kings? And it worked. Jin reworked the order and placed Wei before Tsai. Was it right for Wei to be placed before Cai? Who can say? The point is that Priest Tuo claimed a great victory for his duke, not by force, not by doing what was right, but simply with his words. And not only did he use those words to win, he used them to please his duke. There's no doubt he succeeded, cementing his place in the duke's heart and pleasing him in a way that he would never forget. So let me bring things back home here and address the very last part of passage 6.16. That's Confucius's lament that it's difficult to get by in the present age. Hearing those stories, you really can't help but sympathize. Sometimes you just want to be a normal guy, not a royal boy toy or a bootlicking attack dog. And that's what Confucius spent 15 years abroad trying to do. Find someone who would pay attention to him without attempts to flatter or impress. One day, Duke Ling asked Confucius to advise him on military tactics. Confucius knew the last thing Duke Ling should be doing was starting a war. Someone who didn't even have the respect of his own countrymen, even if his army was victorious, how could he win the hearts of the people in those newly conquered lands? So he told the Duke he was more of a specialist in ritual vessels, and that he'd never really studied military tactics. The next day, he left Wei. Let's move on and discuss the language in these passages. My goal here is putting a few things out there for language learners at any level. As usual, if you don't find something for you, just give me a shout at elliot@analects.net. One quick point about the state of Wei. The state's name is usually spelled W-E-Y in English. If you study Chinese, that's going to strike you as strange. W-E-Y is not standard pinyin. But this is a convention used by historians and archaeologists to prevent confusion and distinguish it from another state, also called Wei. The W-E-Y Wei that we're talking about here was a smaller, older state that existed during the spring and autumn period. The other Wei, spelled W-E-I, emerged later during the partition of Jin, the seminal event marking the end of the spring and autumn and the beginning of the Warring States. Now let's talk about passage 1.3. This passage has two subjects, yan, words, and se, an appearance, countenance, or facial expression. Yan is paired with qiao, which refers to skillfulness or artfulness. That meaning is reflected in the modern word ji qiao, skill or craftsmanship. But qiao also has a pleasing aspect as well that's not really reflected in those other English translations, but it's still alive and well in phrases like tai qiao le, something people often say upon a serendipitous occurrence to mean what a coincidence. Ling in passage 1.3 often gets translated as commanding, and while that's certainly a legitimate meaning of the character, commentaries do not support it as the proper meaning here. Instead, they all say it has a generally positive meaning. It's something that puts people at ease and makes them feel joy. The exact semantic shift from commanding to good really escapes me, but at least it makes sense that Ling pleases like qiao. Xian we've encountered in earlier episodes. Don't let your modern Mandarin throw you off. This means rare, not fresh, and it's third tone, not first. Yi is a slippery one. It always is. Some renderings of 1.3 will turn this into indeed or alas. So DC Lau, for example, writes, "It is rare indeed for a man with cunning words and an ingratiating face to be benevolent." Others just throw an exclamation point at the end for emphasis. I did something different. I inverted the word order to place the emphasis on the rareness of human-heartedness among such people. I hope that did the trick. Finally, there's Ren. Check out episode 8 if you want a deep dive on this one. I'm still sticking with human-hearted, but it's variously translated as benevolent, good, virtuous, and humane. Now on to 6.16. We see parallel structures between the first two clauses with this 不有 and 而有, with the subject of Song Chao's beauty and Priest Tuo's smooth talk. It could mean without one but with the other. It could also mean without one or the other. There's scholarly debate about this. It's sleep-inducingly boring. So they can't tell you what it means, and I can't either. But I say it doesn't matter in the end. We know from the rest of the Analects that Confucius isn't a fan of either of these qualities. We've talked enough about Song Chao and Priest Tuo, but it's worth noting that Priest Tuo's title is right there in his name. It's Zhu, which in modern Mandarin means to wish or bless, like in the phrase 祝你新年快乐, wish you a happy new year. Zhu was certainly a temple staff like we discussed. I found it rendered as invoker. That just sounds like a Dungeons & Dragons character class to me. Zhi is repeated 3 times in these passages. It's the classical equivalent of de, indicating possession or modification. Prince Chao's beauty, Priest Tuo's smooth talk, today's world. These are all possessives in English. Ning is a funny one. We'll certainly cover it in future episodes, but what I want to point out here is it's kind of a bizarre version of Ren. You may know that Ren combines a person element with a character for the number 2. Ning takes those 2 same elements as Ren and then adds another element meaning woman. Ning, at its root, just means clever with words, though as a pejorative, it means sycophantic or given to flattery. Anyway, you can think of it like a counterpart to Ren. Those with Ren care a lot about people. Those with Ning care a lot about words. Mei means exactly what it does today, beautiful. I'd say it even has that feminine sense to it. I don't believe you typically refer to a man as Mei, even in ancient Chinese. So when we discuss Song Chao's beauty, that's where the sense of over-the-top good looks came from. Now into the home stretch. Nanhu, difficult too. Nan means something is hard, like it does in modern Chinese today, and hu is a general preposition, often rendered as at, on, or even with. But here, it clearly means to. When we tag "e" at the end of this passage onto nanhu, because that's the only place emphasis makes sense, we end up with, it sure is difficult. Mian yu requires a little logic to render properly. Mian literally means to escape or avoid, and yu is another preposition, in this case, something like from. We end up with get by for these 2 characters, and that's just because if you think of mian like escaping from harm, then it's really just indicating survival. Last up, jin zhi shi. Jin means now, the present. That's just like jin tian, today. It literally refers to the current day. And shi is an age or period of time, like in shiji or century. I took some poetic license above since it's most accurate to translate this as the present age, but I don't think anyone's going to kill me for today's world. All right, that covers all the characters. I wanted to wrap up by saying, if you plan to start reading the Analects, my number one suggestion is, don't read it cover to cover. Even if you're a freak like me, it's roughly a coin toss whether or not you'll make it to the end. What's better is to read several passages together that are all focused on the same terms or concepts. You could read all the passages about a specific disciple. If you're going to do that, I recommend starting off with Yan Hui. Or you could read several passages that all mention clever words and glibness. Today's episode was an example of that, so I hope it helped bring those obscure names and general statements to life. Again, I'm your host, Elliot Bernstein. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Exploring the Analects. Don't forget to visit analects.net to check out the episode guide, and drop me a line at elliot@analects.net if you've got questions or comments. Join me again next time when we'll be discussing passage 4.8, our first encounter with Tao. After all these episodes, we'll finally be talking about the Confucian vision of the way. See you there.